Hello. Welcome to Science Streams. And tonight we have a great guest, Evangeline Rose. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And we have a lot of topics we're going to talk about tonight. And just to kind of start off, tell us about yourself.
Okay. I am a researcher. I'd like to think of myself as an animal behavior. Like my focus is in animal behavior, but more recently I've been doing more neuroendocrinology, thinking about how hormones and the brain affect behavior. So I got my PhD at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and I'm now a postdoc at the University of Maryland, College Park. So I didn't go that far, just about an hour away. And I study birdsong. So I'm most interested in female birdsong. It's interesting. I've been in the birdsong field so long that I'm like, well, obviously everybody thinks only male birds sing. And what I study is female song, and that's why it's cool. And my mother-in-law told me recently that most people don't think that. Most people think all birds sing, most everyday people. So I thought that was interesting. But I focus on female song, which is not something researchers have focused on much until the 80s and 90s, and what it's for, how it evolved, how it functions in the brain. And I'm just really interested in sex differences in behavior. So that's me in a nutshell.
So we all want to know, why does the cage bird sing?
I mean, it depends. Is the cage bird a male or a female?
Did you just say it doesn't matter?
No, I mean, the why is different.
Oh, okay.
The why is definitely different. If it's a male bird, he's singing to get a lady. But if it's a female bird, she could be singing for a whole bunch of different reasons. Could be to get a male. It could be to, well, probably a cage bird. If it's a female and she's alone, it's probably to get a male. But if she's got a partner, there could be a whole slew of other things.
How do you know? How do you decipher it as
The
a
function?
researcher? Yeah, like what it's for.
So welcome to the whole 6 years of my dissertation. It's not easy. So you can make what's called an ethogram. So ethology, like ETH, ethology, is the study of behavior. So an ethogram is basically a collection of every single thing an animal does. And you basically are able to like statistically correlate things to figure out what things coincided. So I would basically follow birds in the field for like weeks and weeks and weeks, every single day, wake up at like 4 a.m., be out there before sunrise, and get, when are they singing? What are they singing? What is their mate doing? What is the neighbor doing? What is the baby's doing? And like every single piece of information, put it all together. That's like a classic ethogram, which not that many people do anymore. And then you can basically do, like, I did a lot of like generalized linear mixed models. So you throw a bunch of variables into a statistical model and kind of like shake it and see what comes out.
And you're like, I'm just going to do some correlations and see which has a nice p-value. And then you
Right. I
publish
mean,
it.
it's not all correlations, but
Okay.
yeah, for sure. Um, there are like ways you can test function in the lab that are a little bit different, that are more like controlled. So, if the function is mate attraction and you give the bird like an opportunistic, like if you give a male the opportunity to
Mm-hmm.
see a female and he sings and he doesn't sing otherwise, you can assume that he's singing in some way towards that female, and then you can sort of dice it down. But in the field, you really have to just get every single piece of information and sort of go from there with really, really big statistical models.
Now, I saw the Grants do this, when they were doing research on Darwin's finches, right? And they would put a
Mhm.
speaker out in the woods, right? And their
Yeah.
mist net, and then they would play the vocalization and then see, the response, right?
Hmm.
Of course,
Yeah.
I've done this in my backyard when I have like squirrels running around, and then I'll get the red-tailed hawk on Merlin ID, and I'm like, and I play it, and they're like, oh crap, they start running for
Yeah.
cover. So
100%.
so that's similar
That
like research that you're doing where you have a stimulus and then you look at a response.
Right. Yeah. So I had in my research, I did a lot of visual stimuli because I was sort of going off of like a bunch of theories of what female song functioned in. And so like one option is mate attraction. So I had a little like I studied bluebirds. So I had a little male bluebird model and I would present it to females and be like, "Man, maybe are you interested?" And some people hypothesized that it had to do with like a predator deterrent, like aerial predators or ground predators. So I'd present like a sharp-shinned hawk or a snake
Mm-hmm.
and sort of see how they respond. It turned out they really didn't care about any of my models. That it was really in eastern bluebirds, it's all about their mate. And so in the end, all the models just turned out with like a proximity to mate and like what the mate is doing, predicted female song. So all
So,
those models were for naught.
right. So if you hear a bluebird, then
Uh-huh.
it's probably just singing to a mate.
Yeah. I mean, if you hear a male bluebird, he could be singing to find a new mate. But if you
Mm-hmm.
hear a female bluebird, she's probably singing to coordinate with her current mate. And the males do that too. So it depends if you're like early in the spring, like right nowish or in the next month, the males are on the hunt for a female. But if it's like July and you hear a bluebird, they're already paired up. And it's most likely that you're hearing a breeding pair try to communicate, figure out who's going to feed the babies next, and just try to do like sort of pair coordination things on their territory.
Wow.
So,
And I can imagine this takes a long time to kind of, like you said, 6 years, because you could go
yeah.
out one day looking for a specific bird and not find it, or hear
Well,
it in the distance and be like, okay, I'm not able to observe what it's doing. Or do you get so like in tuned with the bird, you and the bird become one, and you kind of have a second sense. You're like the bird whisperer.
well, my husband calls me the bird whisperer, so maybe I am.
Okay.
But the nice thing about bluebirds is they nest in cavities. And unfortunately, we've deforested a lot, but on the bright side, that means people have made bluebird trails to keep the bluebird from going extinct. So my birds were nicely numbered by nest. It was like, I'm going to go to nest 1 today, and I know these birds are here, and I've given them little colored bracelets. And I look up on the telephone wire right above the box, and there they are with their correct colors. So my birds are actually incredibly easy to find. And birds are actually highly, highly territorial in the summer. So even if you go hiking on the same trails every day and you know your bird songs by ear, you can be like, when I go around this bend, I'll hear a song sparrow. And sure enough, you go around and there he is because he's been there all summer guarding that territory and singing his little head off. And it's the same bird every time. So birds are pretty reliable, I feel like, for a field species.
So Ron Solo in chat, who I think says that
Yes, maybe a
you
little
know,
bit.
you know, he's seen you whisper to them.
Yeah, he probably has. That's my husband, for those of you watching.
Figured as much.
So yes, no, that's definitely him. Um, yeah, I mean, I do a lot of work with birds, and I before I started my PhD, I did a lot of work catching birds. I was in the neighborhood nest watch program,
Mhm.
which is like a citizen science program to teach people how to track birds in their yard. We would band people. birds in people's backyards, and then they would report back to us like, oh, I saw the American robin with the orange band come back this year, and that kind of stuff. And they nested in this bush, and this is how many nests they had and how many babies and that kind of stuff. And so I mean, I had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bird bands under my belt before even starting my PhD. So I do really love field work. I love catching birds and working hands-on with them. So I think compared to most PhD students starting in an ornithology field, I had a lot of bird handling experience going in, which was pretty fun. But now I'm in the lab and I don't get to do any of that. I know, it's sad.
Yeah, I think as far as research, a lot of people have one of the things they have to discover in a career is how they like to do science.
Uh-huh. For sure.
Myself personally, like I like the outdoors, but then I had a job with the Forest Service and I was outdoors, you know, all day, every day.
Yeah.
And it was too much, because you got to the time off and you're like, well, what am I going to do now? I don't want to go
Right.
outside. I spent all my
No,
time with
exactly.
it was too much. And then I had a job where it's all lab and I was like, this sucks too.
Yeah, I kind
There's
of, so I
for
kind of,
me, there's a happy medium. Some people love being outside all the time, like, constantly. And that just wasn't for me.
yeah. I mean, the nice thing about field work is we only did it from April to August.
Mhm.
So I got like half the year in the lab, half the year in the field. So that I feel like is the happy medium. I really loved that. I didn't love the 3 a.m., 4 a.m. mornings every single day for like 6 months. That was a little bit rough. I'm not a morning person. But now I'm in 100% lab, and I really do miss being out in the field.
Now,
So it's definitely a balance.
I've had a few experiences with birders. One being we're in the cloud forest in Costa Rica. And I was in a college class at that point. And there were these
Mhm.
birders. And of course, they stayed up all night drinking. And then they wanted to wake up at 3:30 in the morning to go birding. And I'm like, how do you function? I mean,
That's
this was like,
normal.
I'm about to say, I'm asking a birder now, like, that was one of my experiences. But from other people I've talked to, that's almost like normal
Yeah.
birder, like,
Yeah.
let's stay up drinking bourbon until midnight and then wake up in 3 hours and look at birds and then sleep the
Yeah.
rest of the day.
100%. I mean, birders taught me how to drink. Like, I just feel like that is just part of the status quo of that. But no, I mean, every birder I know, I mean, there's like adorable grandmas and stuff who like birds, and that's probably not their jam. But like people between the ages of 19 and 45 or 50, if they're serious birders, I feel like that just comes with drinking at night. And like it's just really fun. It's like when you get to go birding, it's like a super fun social activity. And so you
Mhm.
do this, especially if you're on a trip, like in Costa Rica, I can imagine. I've gone birding. Um, the warbler capital of the world is in northern Ohio, and I went to college in Ohio. And so we would go up there every single year because what happens is the warblers, which are tiny, tiny, colorful songbirds,
Mhm.
they kind of fall out before the Great Lakes to eat food before they travel across the Great Lakes to go to Canada. And so it's basically like they're just raining from the sky to land to recover to eat food before they do the Great Lakes. And we would just, I mean, we literally all went up there with tents and we drank all night and woke up at like 3 a.m. and birded all day. And then we drank all night and we did it for like 4 days every year. It was pretty fun.
So I'll put in chat, since we've already started about drinking. Um, and you mentioned warblers, and I think that's very interesting. The warbler capital of the world. The one of the
Mhm.
local breweries here is the Warbler Brewery. They just opened in the past year.
Oh, that's cool.
So if you ever come to upstate New York and the Albany
Maybe.
area, there you go. You can go get some Warbler brews. Uh,
All right.
so I put that in chat just to you know
Nice.
help the local tourism and business out in this area.
I haven't
So
been to upstate in a long time, but there's some beautiful canoeing areas up there.
yep. Um, so what are some other, like, there's the Warbler capital of the world.
Hmm.
What are some other bird capitals of the world? I'm curious now. Do we know of any others?
I don't know of any I mean, that's the one I've been to. I do know that a lot of places have like festivals. So in New Mexico near Albuquerque, when the cranes migrate through, they have a big crane festival.
Hmm.
Um, in the fall. And so I know that like in a lot of places, birds are like they have festivals and celebrations and that kind of stuff. I know in like South Florida and South Texas, like along the Gulf, when the hummingbirds fall out, I know that's a big birding event because the hummingbirds, are migrating from South America. They barely have any energy when they get over the Gulf and they just all like fall to the ground. So I don't think anybody calls that like the hummingbird capital, but I do know that a lot of people go to see that. And it's just interesting, like if you think of cultures around the world, a lot of them have a lot of bird symbolism, especially like China and Japan with all the cranes and a lot of different things. Like I think birds capture the imagination. So it's definitely, I don't know, I think they're one of the coolest study species. And I also know like of the non-mouse rat primate study species, birds are the number one. Like a lot of researchers complain, like, could you study something other than birds? Like there's so many interesting animals. We need to know more about other animals, but I think a lot of people are drawn to birds.
Well, I
And
think
there's a lot of cool
birds are
things to
very
learn.
universal because they're on every continent.
Yes.
They're everywhere. Whereas, weird fact about New York, there's only one lizard on New York, and
Really?
it's only in Long Island. So it's one of those weird, facts. So like you're not going to be a lizard person in upstate New York.
Right. No, probably not.
But birds are universal.
Birds are everywhere.
They're everywhere, and everyone can relate to them. Um,
Yeah.
and so that's why I found, and we'll talk a little bit about the Black Birders movement that happened this past summer.
Uh-huh.
If you want to talk about that at all, but I think it goes to how universal science should be
Right.
and acceptable for everyone to participate. And I know that's part of what you do on your podcast as well.
Yeah, I was about to say if you don't segue into it, I probably will. So my husband and I have this podcast, I'll Take My Science Neat. And the whole point of it is we want to equip everyday people who wouldn't normally feel like they could access science. We want to equip them to learn about science, understand the vocabulary, and be able to access papers and start investigating for themselves and having tools of like how to use Google Scholar, how to use PubMed, how to email an author and ask for a publication. So that's sort of a huge passion of ours, especially with, oh, I'm just going to punch it, everything that's happening in the world right now. A lot of people are just using science as this just like blanket word that is starting to lose its meaning. And we really want everyday people who aren't the media and aren't politicians and aren't people with an agenda to sort of get back to what is science? How do I access it? Does it help me in my day-to-day life? That kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something we're passionate about. And we do feel like, I feel like in my research, um, I published a paper last year about diversity in science. I was the co-first author. I had an amazing undergrad who did an independent project, and it was basically about this female song topic that we study. Was mostly pioneered by women. And of course, men were more in these fields of science in the, past and 60s and 70s and 80s. But with more and more women coming into the field, women bring a unique perspective. And we started investigating things that hadn't been investigated before. And I think that's true of every group, whether it's race or gender or socioeconomic class. We really wanted to make the point in that paper that the more diversity of scientists you bring in on an issue, the more diverse perspectives you get and the kind of the cooler, more unique answers you get. So that's something I'm pretty passionate about, both with the podcast and with my work.
Yeah, and that's an extremely important path. And I think as science communicators, SciComm, I think we all kind of play a part in doing
Yeah.
that, in amplifying voices and perspectives. That's why it's important for everyone to see that. And I also want to go back to, back in the day, it was extremely common for people to be naturalists. It was,
Yes.
and birding is part of that, but it was just commonplace for people to collect rocks, to collect minerals, to,
Mhm.
go out birding, fishing and things like that, where I think we kind of got out of that somewhere in the 80s, maybe.
Mhm.
And And even, and I think there's been this resurgence of that during the pandemic, and maybe it's one of those silver lining things where people now are kind of looking more to the natural world and
Mhm.
saying, hey, I'm sick of looking at a freaking screen. I'm going to go out and look through
Right.
binoculars. Do you
Yeah.
see that happening as well?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, I don't know, I haven't seen more people birding necessarily, but I've definitely seen a lot more people hiking and just getting outside. And I have seen more people interested in like, posting on their Instagrams like, "Hey, I found this weird plant. What is it?" And looking up resources because there's all these apps to identify plants and insects and birds and stuff. And I feel like I've seen more people asking about those and investigating and just getting
Hmm.
out hiking um, and kayaking. I don't know if you've ever heard of Harper's Ferry. It's
Yep.
in Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland. It's right where those three states come together. But I live near there, and when I drive through, which is like on my commute, so I go through there pretty often, I used to never ever see that many people there. And now since the pandemic started, it's like, well, we have nowhere else to go. We might as well like go whitewater rafting or kayaking or hiking these super, super steep hills up in the mountains or that kind of stuff. And just seeing more and more people outside, I think it's good. I think it's, yeah, for sure a silver lining of quarantine.
Yeah, and
So,
it's also, you would hope, especially, with younger generation, I teach teenagers, that
uh-huh.
they would have that outdoor experience as well, and then be more inclined to, be conservationists and work to protect our natural resources in the future if they have these passions
100%.
out as well. So that's where, we also come into lending these perspectives, but, it's about the kids, dang it,
Yeah.
about the
No, I mean,
kids.
it is about the kids. When
Yeah,
I was little,
for sure.
I might be aging myself, but when I was little, we had like Steve Irwin and we
Hmm.
had all these people who like even if you weren't getting outside, they were making you excited about things that were outside, animals and just the world and plants and David Attenborough's still around, but I feel like I
Hmm.
don't see him as much as I used to and I do feel like we need a new generation of people our age to start really getting the next generation excited about it. Because otherwise, and not just nature, but like science in general, like we just landed another rover on Mars. And I
Hmm.
don't think anybody was excited. Like we were excited. My husband works at NASA, but like I went to work and everybody's like, it's just Mars again. And I was like, science is
What?
so cool. We did a cool thing, guys.
Well, that's the way I was, but
So,
I teach 13-year-olds at work, so it's like I'm excited, and and they're like,
right.
okay,
Oh
woo,
gosh.
Estradiol's going
Old
cuckoo.
old people.
Oh yeah. No, but the kids usually they'll feed off you, That so
Yeah,
if you're excited, they'll get excited, and so I think it's good, even if you are the only person excited in a room, you can
mhm.
instill that excitement in other people in the room, and people like to see other people passionate about stuff.
Right,
Whereas
for
if you
sure.
kind of like, oh, no one likes my geeky science-ness, I'm gonna go hide now. That's
Yeah.
that's not doing anybody any good.
No, you can't be timid about the things
No.
you're passionate about.
Hence why you have a
It's
podcast. I'm sitting here on Twitch.
right, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, excitement is like a positive force. Like if you put a candle in a dark room, it lights up the whole room, even though there's
Hmm.
less light than there is dark. I'm putting that in heavy quotes. But I mean, excitement's the same way. It can be extremely contagious. And if you get passionate and excited about things, you can share it with other people. And that applies to everything in life, not just science, but just
Hmm.
anything that you're
Oh yeah.
super excited or passionate about.
Yep. So tell me, which bourbon are you excited and passionate about tonight?
Oh, tonight, what am I drinking?
This is my segue. Yeah.
Oh,
What are we
okay,
doing?
this is Elijah Craig Small Batch.
Oh,
I'm
that's what
doing a
that's what you're
repeat.
having the other day on that stream.
Yeah, it
You're,
is. I
yeah.
It was open, it was on the shelf. My favorite bourbon is not a bourbon, it's a rye. My favorite whiskey
Okay.
is
I'm writing
Angel
it.
Envy's rye finished in rum barrel. You're writing it down.
Okay.
It's kind of on the pricier side. We usually drink like 30 or $40 bottles. That one is pricier, but it is my favorite. So, um, and my husband's favorite, actually, there's a distillery in Michigan. They don't distribute past Michigan, Indiana, Northern Ohio, but it's New Holland Brewing Company. I don't know if you like beer, but they have a really good beer called Dragon's Milk, which they
Yes.
distribute nationwide.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same. They finish their bourbon in the Dragon's Milk barrels. It is phenomenal. We actually drive, my brother lives there, so it's a little cheating. We drive to see him, but we do actually drive from here to Michigan. It's a long, long drive just to get that bourbon. It's really good.
Road trip.
Road trip, I know. We do it every summer. But then we see my brother too, so it's like a double whammy good trip.
Okay, now your opinion of Scotch.
I'm not a huge Scotch drinker, but one of our good friends recently introduced us to Highlander Scotch. Comes in a black box, and then when you take it out of the black box, it's in this really, really fancy bottle that has like red lettering, and it's incredible. It's got all these like incredible spiced and floral tastes. It's not just that like peat that hits you really hard with most scotches. So that I'm not a huge fan of Scotch, but I will recommend that one. That's an excellent Scotch.
Very nice. Very nice. I didn't drink Scotch until I actually went to Scotland, and then I got some, and then, there you go.
There you go. I've never been to Scotland, but it's on my bucket list. So maybe I'll get into Scotch when I go there.
Yeah. Did you know that rye is considered America's like beverage?
I didn't.
Yeah.
I know it originated in America, and I know how it's differentiated from American whiskey and bourbon and all those things, but I didn't know it was considered America's beverage.
By some. I don't know. It's not official, but by some. That's,
I mean, I like rye, so I'll go with that.
Yep. So, yep. Just recent, did I start doing the Scotch as well as rye. So, I am not the connoisseur that I think you and Ron Solo there are when it comes to that. But the that New Holland bourbon barrel, that's
it's really good. They have a bourbon and they have a rye, and they just released a single barrel version of the bourbon, which we just tried the other day, and it was like so good. So I would highly recommend. I know we keep joking that we're going to call them one day to sponsor our podcast because we love their bourbon so much. We're going to be like, we'll talk about it. Give us $5.
Well, there you go. You already did. They should already be like,
right. They should be all over that.
Sending you there, be like, look, all 4 viewers on that Twitch stream are going to go out and get that now. Come on.
Right.
Look at all that.
Exactly.
So awesome. And how long have you done the podcast now?
So we're about to enter our second month. There are 4 episodes up from the past month. There's actually 5, but the 5th one is behind the paywall for patrons. Because we do an extra short episode every week for patrons and then one long episode at the end of the month. Our 6th episode is releasing this Friday, which we're pretty excited about. We talked about chocolate, which was fun for us because we ate chocolate while we talked about chocolate. But we talk about the science of chocolate. Is it a food? Is it a drug? What's the chemistry behind the flavor of chocolate? And then we do like a battle of the wits chocolate trivia. So so the podcast has been up for a month. Every week is wildly different. We talked about video games one week. We talked about the Mandela effect last week. I don't know if you saw that episode. But we're trying to keep it real with super different science every week so that people can just sort of get excited about science and start to understand how to access science. We talk about, like I mentioned earlier, like how to go on Google Scholar, how to find an article, how to tell if it's a peer-reviewed journal. I think in a few weeks, we're going to talk about survey methods, what makes a good survey, what makes a bad survey. My university sent out a survey. They asked everyone in the community to take. And I started taking it, and I got so mad because the questions were completely leading. It was like, it was just a really badly written survey. And I like rage quit a survey. I didn't even know that was a thing you could do, but I was like, people need to learn how to write surveys and like when they're being duped by a bad survey. So, and that's because surveys get used a lot in science too. A lot of the studies we've talked about, especially the video game episode, we talked about like the scientific methods were, oh, we surveyed 2,000 high school students, and this is what they said. And good papers will actually release the survey, so you can read the questions and see, like, were they leading questions? Were they fair questions? Did they really get at what they were trying to get at? So we've got a lot coming up. We're pretty excited.
Awesome. Now tell me a few things about this your channel. You have some merchandise, I believe.
Yeah, we do. Well, the one behind me, actually up here, this is a tank top, but so this is our little kitten Zelda, and it says Podcats. So this is actually one that we're doing as a giveaway this week. So if people want to go to I'llTakeMyScienceNeat.com, we're actually giving away some canvas art of our Podcats design. I'm also wearing, I don't know if you guys can see it. I'm wearing Research Lab. It's a little doggy in a lab coat.
Cute.
And then
Nice.
I actually just got this one today. I'm really excited about it. I don't know if you're a Final Fantasy fan, but we are. Ooh. And it's a pillow. I don't know if you can see it. It says Moogle Scholar.
Okay. Yep.
So, and he's reading a book. Yeah. So it's not all blue. I just realized everything I have here is blue, but we have aprons and mugs, and it's just a ton of science themed and cute merchandise. So we're doing the giveaway for podcasts, but people can go on our website and either listen to the podcast, which we hope you guys do. That's number one goal. But you can also go and buy some merch and sign up for our newsletter. And it also has like our mission statement there about the importance of science for everyday people and how we want to teach people about science. So yeah, so if people want to find us, they can go to I'llTakeMyScienceNeat.com. And I'm also on Instagram and Twitter under MyScienceNeat. So we are out there, and we really want to hear like what people are excited about. We've only been out for a month, and so this was a great opportunity for us to sort of reach, some people that we hadn't reached before, and hear like what kind of science do other people think are cool. I think birds are cool. I could talk about birds every single week, but I don't think everybody else wants to hear about birds every single week.
Well, one of the awesome things about science is that there are so many different topics. Right?
Yeah.
There's everything you can think of under the sun you can talk about for science. So and there's so many people doing it. So many, like, I don't know. I try to tell my students that there's so many different career choices within science itself, not just researchers, right?
100%.
But policy and law and everything else that goes with not just, science as far as research.
Right. And even within research, there's like academia, and there's also like, you can do like my brother has his PhD in electrical engineering, and he's working for the Department of Defense. My other brother has his PhD in physics, and he's working for an engineering company, like out in the world, just creating things that people need. And I'm in academia, and you can also, like, the Forest Service, you can work for museums, you can work, and then there is policy, and then there's like people who work for the NIH who are just helping with funding. A lot of NIH people, like the boards and stuff, are academia people, but I think they have staff who are just like designated for that kind of stuff. There's also like the CDC, and there's a lot of choices within science. And there's teaching. I love teaching.
Oh, thanks.
So, there's teaching at every level, I taught human anatomy for 6 years, and it was some of the most fun I had in grad school. Like, it was super, super rewarding to see. I had all pre-nursing students, and to see them, to see it click, and for them to get so excited and be like, oh, I understand how the brain works, or I understand how all these muscles go together and why they're named that, and why, I thought it was super weird before, but now it all makes sense. Like, that's a super rewarding feeling. I really, really love teaching. I think more people should do it.
Yeah. My youngest daughter decided that she wants to go into education, maybe. But she wants to also work at like a zoo or an aquarium. So we're like, okay, well, that works
sounds
out.
Good.
You can do that, right? You can be the on-site educator at an aquarium or a zoo or whatever. That sounds like a really fun job, actually. That sounds great.
Yeah, I wanted to work in a zoo when I was little. That was like life goals. But then I realized the world is a zoo and I could do that instead. So
So I want to ask you, and I ask everyone that comes on to have conversations with me about where they have been, because usually a lot of times science takes you some fascinating places. Right? We know you've been to the Warbler capital of the world.
yes.
Where else have you been that you want to talk about, or have you not been anywhere? I don't want to put words in your
Well,
mouth.
I have been some places. I don't feel like my list. So I know you had Alice Cho on a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
and her list is way more fun than mine. But so I have been to Puerto Rico. I did some research in
Mhm.
Cabo Rojo, which is down on the southwest corner of Puerto Rico. So that was pretty fun. I've been to the Bahamas doing research on the island of Andros, which is one of the family islands. And I didn't go to North Andros, but I was in the center part and then on South Andros. Um, and I've been to Belize, not for research, but for birds, because, birds. And Mexico, also for that same birding trip. And then the rest of it is all in the United States. So for science stuff, I've been to, conferences all over the United States, really. I worked in Massachusetts. I worked in North Carolina. There's a place called Scotland Neck. I'm just going to kind of plug this. This was an internship I had a long time ago, but Scotland Neck, North Carolina is literally nowhere. Like, if you could find nowhere and turn left and go 100 miles more into nowhere, that's where Scotland Neck, North Carolina is. And there is a bird park there. It's the largest breeding facility of ducks, geese, swans, and cranes in the world. They do a ton of endangered species stuff. They do a ton of land management. They're buying out like a ton of cypress swamp and stuff to keep it from being
Wow.
developed. The guy who runs it, the director, used to be the head, like in charge of all the aviaries for the Queen of England. And when he retired, he moved to Scotland Neck, North Carolina, and opened up this park and opened up this breeding facility. So I worked there for summer. So there's half of it that's not open to the public. That's all the breeding. And then there's a half of it that's completely open to the public. And they you can feed a flamingo out of your hands, and you can go in these huge aviaries with birds from all over the world. And they have every species of crane. And that's like a super, super cool place, but you have to go there on purpose. You're not going to accidentally end up in Scotland Neck, North Carolina.
Get lost and end up there, and you're like, oh my gosh, what the heck?
Yeah.
There's
The funny
nothing
thing
out
is,
here.
I think there used to be a train way, way back colonial days that went through Scotland Neck, because hundreds of miles away, there'll be signs on the highway that'll say Scotland Neck, 100 miles. And you're like, what? That place is is there a stoplight in town? There might be one stoplight in that town. It's literally nowhere. It's 10 houses and this bird park. So that's a cool place. I know it's North Carolina's not really that exotic, but it was a super, super cool place to work.
It's pretty exotic.
So,
For a Yankee like me, anything south of the Mason-Dixon is more exotic. I go to Scotland,
well,
and that's less exotic than going to
the North
the
Carolina.
North Carolina or Georgia or something. Okay.
It's funny. Well, my husband's from North Carolina, so I'm down there every whip stitch anyway. So, yeah. So definitely, I mean, yeah. So the Bahamas and Puerto Rico for research are the most exotic places I've been, and then Belize and Mexico for a birding trip was pretty fun. And then just continental United States, seeing all the birds everywhere. I really need to make it to New Mexico for that crane festival. That's on my bucket list.
What that's
So,
your bucket list, the Crane Festival? That's
well, it's on my
one.
bucket list.
Okay.
It's not the whole
What's the
thing.
rest of the what's the rest of the bucket list?
Oh, I want to go birding in Australia. I was supposed to go this year, but
Oh,
COVID happened,
that's
and I had
sad.
to cancel my trip. I know. And I
Sad.
want to go birding in Scotland and New Zealand. And I want to go on a cruise in Alaska and do all the birds on the coast of Alaska. That's my bucket list.
Well, that's our trip that got canceled. We were going to have this big family reunion last
Uh-huh.
summer. It was all planned out. We're going to do an Alaska cruise and everything. My whole
Mm,
family, and then that didn't happen.
yeah. Yeah, I was supposed to give a big talk in Australia, and then I had friend of a friend who I got. She's lives in Australia and does research there, and I had talked her into giving me like a bird tour of southeastern Australia, and then it all got canceled. So
Yeah.
maybe someday I'll get my Australian bird tour.
Oh, and Uncle Bill, thanks for putting the eyes on the channel. Thanks for hanging out. I really don't have a bucket list right now because I don't want to get disappointed.
Oh,
As far as traveling anywhere, at least.
well, that's true. I mean, travel's hard right now, but I mean, you have a lot of life for your bucket list left.
I
mean,
know,
you
I
better have
do.
something to hope
I got
for.
to prioritize things. Australia is on there. That's a that's a pretty big one. I think
Yeah.
a lot of maybe they will see an influx of Americans into Australia once this is all over. They better watch out. It's going to be crazy. So
Yeah.
be
Well,
prepared
I
for
think
the
they
American
just
invasion.
right. I mean, I think they get a lot of tourism because of all the animal stuff. And I think like honestly, Steve Irwin captured the hearts and minds of so many people. I feel like
Oh
it
yeah.
really put Australia on the bucket list map.
And
I
I'm
don't
getting
know that
pretty good when I get to Australia with GeoGuessr now. I can actually know where I am usually, as far as I'm in
really
Australia.
somewhere on this giant
Yep.
island.
I can be like, this is Australia. I can tell
Yeah.
now.
That's funny.
But that's the one bucket list. Where else? I don't know. What else on my bucket list? Like, it's funny how no one ever says, even birders usually don't say Africa, even though that's, I don't know what it
Yeah.
is. If it's just like you don't like parasites, but you like birds, but
Right.
I think that's a
Yeah.
stereotype that's unfair to Africa, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of cool birds in Africa, but none of them to me are like bucket list birds. Like the
Oh, okay.
weavers are and the honey eaters, they're all cool, but like they all have cousins in Australia. And Australia has a bunch of like really, really unique things that you can't find anywhere else. So I feel like I don't know. Australia just like because it's an island has so much more uniqueness. New Zealand also, which is like I
Yep.
kind of lump that in my Australia bucket list. Um, and I think also Taiwan is on my bucket list because they have some incredibly cool bird species that, again, island. Um, so I think there's just a lot cool going on there.
I didn't think Taiwan. That's an interesting choice.
Well, I'm also a little biased because one of my best friends ever is from Taiwan. So I want
Okay,
to
there you
go
go.
see. I want to go see where she's from, but I also like all of the islands have really cool, like, I think you could put like Madagascar on that list. You could put any of the like islands. Pretty much you have this increase in biodiversity and you have this increase in like things get really specialized and weird on islands, which is just a rule of islands. Um, and so I think any of the islands that you feel like safe to travel to or you're interested in the culture and the birds, like that's sort of what sort of lines up a bucket list island for me. It always involves birds though.
Now there's all these great exotic places, but let's not forget your own backyard, which
Well, that's true.
is, I know I have some great birds, and this is a great time of year because in February it is like quiet except for the occasional crow. And then throughout March, the decibels gradually get more and more and more till it's starting to get to the cacophony every morning where I just wake up and it's just like, shut up! I want to sleep! Especially if you have the
Yeah.
windows open, and it's like that spring day and you're like, or like early summer and you're like, I can have the windows open. It's going to be nice. And all you can hear at 5 a.m. is freaking birds trying to have sex, you know?
Right, exactly. Yeah. No, they're already starting up in our backyard. My husband and I were sitting on the back porch the other day, and this time of year, you can actually hear, if you know your bird songs by ear, you can hear young birds who this is their first spring. You can hear them practicing, and they're really terrible at their songs. And there's a song sparrow who was sitting in this pine tree we have in the backyard. He was just like trash at his song. Like he was trying so hard, and there's a trill at the end, and he was like he'd do like the first note and then it would just like sputter out and he was just complete trash. And it was like, oh, it's so cool to see like all these theories. I know, like, oh, this is what that we call this plastic song, where they like practice, but they're not really good at it yet. And it's like cool to see it in my backyard. Uh-oh.
Birds
Oh,
aren't
I
real.
just got brought
Okay.
cookies.
Very nice. Look at
Oh, and
that. That's
also Ron
service
says
there.
birds aren't real.
Oh, okay.
He just wants the internet to know that.
Okay. And there are those certain birds that can't sing, so they don't give them the ticket to go to Hollywood. No, that's just too bad.
Exactly, yeah.
It's too
Stuck
bad
at
for
home.
those birds. You're stuck. Yeah. Now, I find it hard. I'm trying to get better at bird songs, but when there's so many birds singing at the same time, sometimes it is just hard to pick out those individual songs. I'm sure in research, you go in, you record it, and you can kind of piece out those individual frequencies, and you can do some fancy audio work with it. Maybe I'm just guessing. You're the expert.
No, we record them. Well, first of all, if you point a directional microphone at a bird, unless there's a bird sitting right behind them singing, you pretty much are mostly just recording that bird. And then we turn them into something called spectrograms, which is a graph that's like time on the x-axis and frequency or pitch on the y-axis. And it's like reading music notes, like high notes are up high, low notes are down low. And it basically just traces out the bird song. And if you were pointed at the right bird, you get what you were looking for. But it is hard, I think, learning the bird songs at the beginning. Like now I just do it like I can lay out in the sun with my eyes closed and be like, oh, song sparrow, robin, chipping sparrow, starling. Like I know where they are. I know how far away they are. I can do it with my eyes closed. But at the beginning, I was looking through my very first birding notebook the other day. And I was like, I literally wrote down, like, I heard that bird that sounds like spring that always sings outside mom's house. Like, I was like, I don't know what it is, but I just like went out and tried. And then I used resources like Larkwire, and there's a couple others where they'll like, Larkwire costs a little bit of money, but it's not much, but you like make quizzes for yourself where like,
okay,
you can quiz by picture, you can quiz by sound, you can quiz by that kind of stuff, and sort of teach yourself the bird songs. And once you get close, like a lot of times right now, like I get rusty every year and have to like sort of re-up my bird skills. And so the other day we were sitting out and I was like, oh, that sounds finchy. And I like tried to look up, oh, is it a purple finch? Is it a house finch? And I sort of like played those songs and compared. But it's definitely a skill like any other. I think like playing piano or
practice.
Sort of any other. Yeah, you just have to practice a lot. It takes a long time.
So there you go, kids. Practice. Learn your bird songs. And Uncle Bill says, I had almost forgotten that meme. Did not need the reminder. I'm not sure which meme that was, but
birds aren't real. It was that meme.
Okay, that meme.
Yeah, it's because I'm a birdologist, as my friends like to say. It's that meme never died for us. Like it was just every once in a while we have a good friend who just texts me like, reminder, birds aren't real. And I'm like, thank you. And the like birds are actually government drones that recharge on the electric wires. There's a lot of memes around.
I just thought they were highly evolved dinosaurs.
Well, that too. Yeah. But they could be highly evolved dinosaur drones that recharge on the electric wires.
Yep.
Yeah.
That too. And now we'll know because I've had my COVID shots. So I can now communicate with the bird drones.
Oh, good. That's what the
works.
COVID shots are for, right?
Yep.
That's what I heard.
Now when a bird lands on your shoulder, it helps you charge.
Yeah. If you have a bird land on your shoulder, I feel like you've got something wrong with you. Bird food on your head. Or it's a seagull and you have a corn dog.
Yep. You get attacked by birds. You ever been attacked by birds? I've been attacked by birds. It's not pleasant.
I think mine were probably more personal than yours. Sometimes the study birds kind of learn who you are. So this is 100% true with crows and ravens. People who study them have to wear costumes because they're like wicked smart and they can learn a human face after one interaction. Bluebirds and songbirds in general like don't learn people's faces, but if you mess with them enough, like every single day for the whole breeding season, they start to learn who you are. So I had to send students out because, like, if I got close, they would just start dive bombing me. And they literally could tell. They would dive bomb my car. Like, they knew my car driving through the park. They're like, oh, that's that girl who opens our nests all the time and looks at our babies. They were not fans. Get her. Never
that's
mind that I
interesting.
kept all the snakes and stuff away from their babies. They weren't paying attention to that part.
They just don't get it.
Ungrateful.
Those ungrateful birds. Well, I have a quiz that we're going to play since this is
dear.
Twitch and we like to play games.
Okay.
And so you have a podcast, right? I'll take my science neat. And you have merch about podcasts. So I thought, right, I thought it'd be interesting to see how much you know about pod people. Meaning the pod people, like the movies. There's several different pod people movies, in case you didn't know.
I didn't.
There's the French Spanish, pod people movie that was lampooned by Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Okay.
And then there's the Invasion of the Body Snatchers themed pod people movies as well.
Okay.
So you're going to get some questions about these movies, and if you get 2 out of the 3 right, someone in the stream tonight will be awarded a gift sub.
Okay, well, I'm really sorry to your stream people. I'm really bad at quizzes, and I've never seen these movies.
I usually there's little hints in there that make it almost obvious, but we'll see. Well, you got to your podcast. You have to know about pod people because you're a pod.
I guess
person
so.
now, right?
I guess I'm missing out now. Yeah.
All right. So you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Question 1. How was the 2007 Invasion of the Pod People movie described by Stephenson of SBS, which is like a review site? Was it A, looks like it was made by a film student who thinks he's a real deal, even though he can't tell how light or sound really works, an idiotic remake that puts everyone involved to shame and perhaps a place in hell? Or was review B? Now let's discuss Invasion of the Pod People. I can't believe how underrated this movie is. Sure, it's contrived, but the acting is fitting for a B movie. I had low expectations going in. It was so compelling as to make the original seem very simplistic. C, the last review. I am dumber for having watched this.
Okay. Are those my 3 choices?
Those are your 3 choices.
Oh, I'm going to assume it's not B. Because you said it was lampooned on Mystery Science Theater. So
well, this was a different one. So there's 2 different versions. There's the 1983 Pod People, right? But then there's this is the remake. This was a remake of a 1953 movie.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of different Pod People movies. In case you didn't know. I did my research.
I didn't know. Well, I'm really bad at quizzes, so I'm just gonna say A.
And you're right.
All right.
Good job. They deserve a place in hell for making that terrible movie.
That's unfortunate.
He's getting paid by the word, so it isn't C. Well, I had someone at I did one of these a couple weeks ago, and they're like, well, it's always the longest one. That's the right one. I was like, well, I know to make that a change.
Right. Change that.
I'm like, is that the case? What? Okay. Question 2. You're doing good so far. Very good.
Yeah, I'm 100%. Right.
So this is about the MST3K Lampoon Pod People one. So who can forget the lovable murderer alien Trumpy from the 1983 Pod People that was remastered in 1991 for MST3K, and it's basically a crappy remake of E.T. But in this case, Trumpy, the alien, goes around killing people and befriends a little boy. So yeah, kind of weird. It's French. What is now a amongst Misties, who we call ourselves that watch MST3K, which is a quotable line, right? Is it A, Trumpy, you can do stupid things? B, Trumpy, don't kill that man. Or C, Trumpy, you'll never get elected.
Those are all terrible lines. Trumpy, don't kill him, or whatever that line was.
It was actually A, Trumpy, you can do stupid things.
You can do stupid things. Well,
Yeah.
that seems to sum up what I'm hearing from the movie.
Pretty much. Though B would not be that far off because that's kind of a weird part of the movie. But who thought pod people? This many versions.
Who thought?
All right, so in my research on pod people, I actually discovered that the 1956 pod people movie was actually based on a novel. And it's what is the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which I'm sure you are
Familiar with.
familiar with that movie. Okay, and
Yes.
in this case, these pods of people come down to the earth and they start inhabiting people's bodies and taking over their brains. As a behaviorist,
Right.
you can relate to this, right?
Oh yeah.
And I actually have a question for you about that later. But anyways, so the replicate and take over as the soulless, unemotional life forms that they are.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the scholar Andrew Howe argues that the 1956 film presented the pod people as a metaphor for what? All right.
Is this multiple choice?
Yes. You have
Okay,
A,
good.
B, and C. You don't have to make up your own metaphor.
All right, good.
Was it A, the propensity of humans to destroy whatever they touch, and that if we aren't careful, we will need to flee our planet to find a new one to live on, just like the pod people?
Okay.
Is it a metaphor for B, human existence and the pointlessness and frivolity of human life as we toil to do nothing but spread our DNA? Or C, was it a metaphor for communism, as the pod people appear to have a sort of collective mind whose precise workings is not explained in the film?
The part where you said the answers were semi-obvious was inaccurate.
I'll give you a hint.
Okay.
This is a 1956 movie.
So we're going communism then.
You are correct.
Okay.
Yep, you are correct. So if you had to listen for the little clues, if you hear 1956, then you're like, oh, communism, right? So of course, collective, non-individualistic behavior is to be, frowned upon. And yep, Uncle Bill knew it right away. He said C. Once you hear the soulless, unemotional life, you think immediately of communism.
Right. I mean, it may not be obvious, but I wasn't around, and I don't think that much about the 50s and 60s.
I only think about communism more, I guess, like I did spend a lot of time growing up in Germany, within East Germany. So
Okay.
there was that communist,
it's a different perspective.
Right, threat for, the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
That was
I mean,
there.
I'm familiar. I mean, I wasn't there for the 80s either.
So that outed my age. Uncle Bill outed his age. Yep.
Yeah, well, I've now outed my age, so.
How well do you know your communism?
Yeah, it is severely age dependent.
Yeah.
I think if you look at people born post 2000, they really don't know their communism.
All right, so I'll give to you got 2 out of 3. Very good. So you said you didn't know anything. I had to give you one hint, but otherwise you were leaning that direction anyways. So
nice. Okay.
Very nice.
I wish I did this well in quizzes on the podcast. Ron is way more ruthless than you are.
All right, Drake Comic, congratulations on your sub. Thanks for being here and watching, and appreciate everyone being here. And if you have questions, please ask them in chat. Evangeline will be more than thrilled to answer your questions about bird behavior. Question I had thinking about the soulless, pod people Are there
Okay.
parasites that will take over bird brains and like make them do things? Didn't I?
I'm not aware of birds getting taken over. I know that there's like a fungus that takes over ants and makes
Hmm.
them do things. So there's like zombie ants. Um I feel like now that you mention it, I feel like there is something about birds. This is not my specialty. I study vocalizations, not necessarily
Right. I don't
zombie
want to put you on
birds.
the spot, but I thought about it and I thought I had
I feel
heard
like
something.
I have a vague recollection of that. I'm not going to say it doesn't exist, but I
Mhm.
can't put a finger on it or tell you yes for sure that's a thing.
Okay. All right. So that's something we'll have to research. And
Yeah,
maybe
I was going to say
you,
we could.
the viewer at home, can do the research.
Yeah, go to Google Scholar and look up zombie birds or bird parasite brain takeover. See what you find and tell us in the chat.
You just can't put the link, so that's allowed. So, but
Yeah.
you can put it in our Discord, or just let us know what you found out about zombie birds. Um,
Yeah.
so, because we do know that so much of behavior is dependent not just on what we think of as consciousness, but um, it can be influenced by what we eat and what we drink and their environment. There's so much that goes into our behaviors. It goes for birds too. Once you get a hold of those berries that have been on the limb a little bit too long, little tipsy bird.
Little tipsy. Yeah, it's amazing what can really, really change behavior. I mean, I study hormones now, um, and I'm studying the effects of testosterone and estradiol on singing behavior and motivation and all that stuff. And just the littlest change has this whole suite of behavioral differences. So,
Hmm.
like, if you give a bird just a tiny bit of testosterone, whole regions in their brain like grow, will like triple in size, and their motivation centers will be activated. They'll start singing, they'll start nesting, they'll start doing all these different things. And that's just testosterone. So, if you think about like the whole suite of things and the food we put in ourselves and all that stuff, can have massive, massive effects on behavior, mood, um, just the way we think, everything.
I know,
It's
yeah,
pretty
something
crazy.
I've been thinking about a lot recently is the microplastics and plastics in
Mhm.
general, and then those are in the environment, and then birds consume something that has those microplastics, especially if they're a predatory bird.
Mhm.
Then you're saying that those small amounts of testosterone, similar chemicals that are in plastics, they could have an effect
They
on their
could have
behavior.
huge effects. Yeah. Absolutely. They could mess up the timing of breeding. They could make them want to breed so much that they abandon the nest that they have. It could make them not want to breed at all. Like there's a suite of different behaviors that could just totally mess up their reproduction. And we know, I mean, you mentioned predators. We know about bioaccumulation now with the DDT scare
Hmm.
back previously with small birds are eating plants that had DDT or insects or whatever, and they have like a little bit of DDT in the system. But as a bigger bird eats them and a bigger bird eats that, the amount of DDT that built up in their tissues was more and more and more till those apex predators like were having serious issues with like eggshell density and all those sorts of things. So, with microplastics, if it's a testosterone like chemical, that could massively affect not just the small songbirds, but all the way up to eagles and ospreys and hawks and all sorts of things.
Wow, we have screwed up the earth.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing a lot of things to fix it, but we have definitely messed it up a lot also.
If only the pod
It's
people would come and take over and
right.
you know,
Where are the pod people when you need them? But um but I do think it's about every single person making an effort in their life to make the earth better than the hurt they're putting into it. Because obviously like it's really really hard to say like I will never use a plastic ever again because basically everything you need is in a plastic bottle. But to be able to say like, oh, if I have a choice and there's a product that I want that's in a reusable glass bottle or making those choices and making the choices to like in my backyard, my garden is geared for pollinators and birds. And I'm not going to have a microculture lawn that's only grass because that's bad for the pollinators. And, just like little decisions you can make about your everyday life, you can make the earth
So Uncle Bill
better.
says there is a flatworm parasite carried by the zombie snail that certain birds also play host to. Yes, that's probably
Does it
what I
turn the
remember.
bird into zombies? Or just the snail?
Just a snail.
Oh, okay.
It's similar to a trematode, I believe, is probably
Okay.
what I'm thinking of.
That sounds.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt the bird.
Zombie snails. That sounds like a slow way to get your.
Right. But I think what it'll do the type of thing where like it makes the snail climb to the, and be exposed so the bird can easily
Eat it.
grab it and eat it, and then it plays part of the host, for the life cycle of the trematode. I believe it's a trematode.
That's cool.
So.
It's the circle of life.
Yep. And I think part of that life cycle's in a frog too. Toads, possibly.
That's complicated. Maybe the frog eats the snail and then the bird eats the
Something
frog.
like that. It's one of those weird things that like when people talk about, we are fairly uncomplicated people compared to the rest of the living world sometimes, I think. Though we are very complicated ourselves, but at least we don't have like molting or instars or,
That's true. We don't have instars or molting. Yeah, our life cycle is simple.
Yep.
And our relationship to the food chain is simple, but our cellular and molecular mechanisms are really, really more complicated than everybody else's.
Yeah, it's pretty complicated. Yeah, but I couldn't imagine having imagine if we were like the fish that could like also just like spontaneously change sex based on all right, look, I'm in a classroom of all boys, I want to turn into a female.
There's a lizard species, I think it's a desert lizard, they're all females and they basically have a fist fight and whoever loses has to become the male. It's like my favorite. I don't know, I just really enjoy that is their mechanism for picking.
Okay, so Uncle Bill says the snails eat the bird poop and then get sick from the worms, which the birds then eat, and then the cycle repeats. So it's a really disgusting circle of life.
It's really gross. Okay, then.
Yeah. Another fun life cycle, since we're talking about life cycles, we're biologists here, that I tell my students, I'm like, oh, you like fig Newtons? Yeah. Most of that's wasp,
Oh, I know.
And they're like,
my
what?
my grandma had this amazing fig tree that like her house was shaped like a U and the fig tree like grew up the center. And I spent my whole childhood like in that fig tree eating figs all the time. And then I went to college and they were like, so you know that like wasps burrow into figs and like die in there when they lay their eggs. And then when you eat a fig, you're just eating wasp eggs and wasp parts. And I was like, oh God, like I did that my whole child. I still like fig Newtons, but it's like it took me a bit to get over it.
And then you're like, I don't care, it was still good.
Right, it's just protein.
The other weird thing about the wasp or the fig wasp is that the females are fertilized before they're born.
Interesting.
I believe it is what it is, because that's the male goes in, because it's like the eggs are already in the fig and then they're fertilized while they're still in the fig. And it's one of those really weird things where you're just like, nature is bizarre.
Nature is bizarre.
What?
Yeah.
And about eating, like I was talking to my students today and I was like, why is it that we can eat, things like lobsters and we can eat shrimp and we can eat crabs, but we can't eat a cricket or a cicada? Yeah. I'm like,
I mean, a lot of people,
a lot of cultures do the same
eat
thing. One's aquatic, one's terrestrial.
Right, but there's less meat. It's the meat to exoskeleton ratio.
I don't know. A maggot and a shrimp can be about the same size.
People eat maggots, though.
I know, but not.
I mean, not in the United States.
I can't go to the Walmart right now and get a bag of frozen maggots. I can get a bag of frozen shrimp. I'm just saying.
Bleh.
Yeah, you're right. It's just, but essentially, it's they're just
It's the
arthropods.
same. Yeah.
They don't knock your
Yeah.
toes
No,
out.
in theory, I agree with you, but also that grosses me out.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. This is what we talk about in class, guys. This is what
well,
science
that's fair.
class
I
is all about.
mean,
It always
teenager.
devolves into food.
Food, yeah, food and gross things. I feel like with teenagers are
Yeah.
always hit topics. So,
Oh yeah, and that's why usually if like no one's participating, especially in the age of COVID, and everyone's just
mhm.
kind of quiet online, and you're like, okay, there's like 15 people online, and no one's saying or doing anything. You start talking about food, and all of a sudden everyone just starts, having they're
Chiming in.
chiming in and got their 2 cents about food, where you mentioned one thing like, oh, I could go for a beef patty, and then it's like they all just, because
Oh yeah.
I didn't know what a beef patty was. Do you know what a beef patty is?
I assume it's a hamburger.
No, no,
Oh, I don't know what it is then.
it's an empanada. It's more like an
Oh,
empanada. They're called beef patties. So if you like, I didn't believe it either. My student's like, I want to go get a beef patty after school. I'm like, you mean a hamburger? She's like, no, beef patty. I'm like, that's just a patty of beef.
beef. That's a hamburger.
Yeah, yeah. And she's like, no, Google beef patty. And I go into Google Images. I Google beef patty. If you do this, it works. And it's a beef patty. It's like an empanada. It's like a
Is
beef
it like
sort of
TTY or DDY? Patty.
I don't remember now. I think it's
Okay.
T's.
T. So it is like a beef patty, like a
Yeah,
burger.
yeah.
Huh.
I didn't know.
Well, empanadas are delicious, so I
Yes,
can
they are.
imagine wanting to get one after
Oh yeah,
school.
it's basically meat fried in a pie crust.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's just. Oh, I'm getting hungry now. You already had cookies.
I
I
know.
didn't get the cookies.
I know. Ron made me. They're like Reese's peanut butter cookies.
Oh,
They're
shut
amazing.
your face.
I know. I'm drinking bourbon and eating Reese's peanut butter cookies.
I'm gonna go to your.
Everyone
I'm
should
gonna go
be
to your
jealous.
house. No, I got Easter cookies upstairs, so I'm good.
Easter cookies. That sounds yummy.
Thank you, Mom. Yep. Well, more information from Uncle Bill. The eye stalks of the sixth snail become bright, pulsating in color, which is what attracts the birds. See, I knew it was something like that, where
All
they're sending
right.
out signals like, "Hey, come eat me," you know.
I'm here. Come get me. That's
Yeah,
interesting. Yeah, I did
yeah.
not know about that.
Yeah, imagine if there was a parasite that did that to us, and it was
That'd be
like,
bad.
yeah, it'd be like all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I don't feel so good. I'm gonna run out into the woods naked amongst the wolves. Yeah.
Right. Gonna go find a bear and hug it. Yeah.
Leucochoridium paradoxum. They don't make
Is the
anything.
name of
I don't know. Is that the name of the snail? I don't even know. I can barely say it. I'm like an eighth grader now. It's like, I'm not even going to try to say it because it's too complicated.
too hard. I'm not in
That's
chat.
okay.
Otherwise,
That's
I'd
the
check it out.
flatworm. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Leucochoridium paradoxum because it's paradoxical somehow.
All right then.
And chloridium.
Scientists don't always have awesome reasons for naming things.
They don't.
I feel like I've known enough people who got to name species that like I definitely think there's some weird. There's a whole series of fish named after presidents. Like I think they're darters and they're like there's one named after Bush, there's one after Obama, there's one after Nixon. Like yeah, it's just like a whole series of president fish names. It's like, well, that doesn't scientifically line up with anything relevant,
You didn't take Greek in school, did you?
right? Oh my gosh, my boss right now is phenomenal, first of all, but I took Latin in school, but like I don't speak Latin. I can read it and I understand what a lot of the words mean.
Yep.
But I told him, I mean, he's much, much older than I am. And I told him I took Latin. He got so excited because I guess he speaks a decent bit of Greek and Latin and like just started like spouting. And I was like, no. Like I took 8 years of Latin, so I can like if you put some Caesar in front of me, like I could like read it sort of. It's been a while since high
Right.
school, but yeah, definitely not speaking, not fast enough to understand anyone who's speaking it.
I think more people speak Klingon now than Latin.
I believe that. I
Or
know people.
or Elvish.
I believe that too. Oh yeah. I went through a phase where I thought that would be a good idea, but I didn't stick with it. I'm not a language person.
Or go on Duolingo just so you can learn Klingon.
Do they have it on Duolingo?
I don't know. That was a
Oh,
joke.
okay. I was
That
like,
was a
I would
half.
believe that.
Oh,
I tried to learn Japanese on Duolingo, but I gave up because I just don't. That's not something that I pick up easily. Is new languages.
Ron Solo says that learning Elvish is still a good idea. I don't know if he means in
Well,
general or just for you.
I mean, he probably means specifically for me and also in general, but I don't think I want to commit the time to it.
It is a time
I think,
commitment.
yeah,
I think it would help if you had like a support group.
a support group.
Yeah, like if you
You go
actually
every
had a D&D group that like you're playing with and you're like, all right, we're going to do this all in Elvish. All right. And you're like, okay, I'm going to have to practice this every week and get better at it. Right. If you're just
get better at
if
it.
you just got an app and you're doing it, that's no fun. Right. But
Right.
if you're kind of like, all right, I have to be in character and the DM is going to have to remember all this
Yeah.
Elvish that I speak to it.
Well, Ron is gonna have to learn Elvish first then, since he's my DM.
Okay. Well, there you go.
So yeah, he needs to get his act together.
Throw it back right at him.
Oh yeah, that's what marriage is, really. I mean, you never let the ball land in your court.
Okay. I'll leave the arguing for later.
I mean, this is our podcast. I mean, if people want a taste of what our podcast is, Ron and I never argue, but we also keep the ball in the air just so nobody's sure really where it's going to land.
Right. That's good. That's good. That's just good, healthy banter. That's what that is.
Mm-hmm.
That's good stuff right there. Being able to poke a little fun without poking too hard.
Yeah. Well, you got to know the limits of the other person.
Yep.
Which is also what marriage is about.
Yep. And then when you go too far, you know what flowers or chocolates to buy.
That's why we did an episode on chocolate.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Awesome. But so my goal for this summer is I got to fill my bird feeders first. That's one of the things I got to do. I actually have to get a better squirrel proof feeder. I think last season I fed more squirrels than I did
Birds.
Whatever, they need food too, I guess. But I would like to know more, like you were saying. That's why I asked that about individual songs. That's part of my goals, but also recognizing a few additional species. There are a few I always get confused that are hard to tell apart. The hairy and the downy woodpeckers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, unless I can see the bar over their eyes, it's really hard to tell them apart.
Hairy and downy.
Yeah.
All right, here's the trick. Look at their beak. Pretend you're shoving it back through their head. If it sticks out the other side, it's a hairy. If it doesn't stick out the other side, it's a downy.
Okay.
So the hairy's beak is longer than the width of its head.
Okay. That's a long beak.
Yeah, it is. But they have small heads.
Oh, okay.
So, and the downy, yeah, I mean, depending on what part of the region, you're in upstate New York, so I'm not super familiar with the bird ratio. But like in a lot of parts of the country, it'll be like, oh, well, 90% of them are downy, 10% are hairy, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in upstate, you might have closer to 50-50, so you might have more of a problem.
I'm pretty sure it's 50-50 because I know I've seen both in my backyard. We also have
I struggle with house finches and purple finches.
Oh, yes.
Their songs are different. I can do that. When you're looking at them, it's only the amount of red on the chest that's different. And the females, as far as I'm concerned, are not different at all. So that's my hardest bird distinction at the feeder.
Yeah, I had that last year. I took a picture of it and I was like, I kept looking at it over and over. And I was like, well, I can't tell if it's just, my camera and the angle through the window. Is that purple or is it not? I'm like, what are the odds of me actually seeing a purple finch? I'm like, I doubt it. I'm like, so I was just like, more than likely it's just, you know, a house.
A house
So
finch.
a
Yeah, I
house
think
finch,
a
but
lot of, especially
yeah,
in the suburbs, a lot of people get house finches.
yeah. We do have a bunch of pileated. Um,
That's great. I love pileated.
so and they're always whacking their heads. Now, do I was thinking this the other morning? Do pileated communicate through the whapping of their heads?
I don't think so. So I studied when I was an undergrad. That was actually my first like research project was helping a master's student study pileated woodpeckers. I don't think so. They have that like really loud, like keek 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 call,
Hmm.
and I do know that they form long-term pair bonds, and that the juveniles will stay an extra year and like hang out with the parents. So you'll often see three moving around together. But I
Hmm.
don't think the drilling is a form of communication. I think they're just looking for food and or making a cavity to nest in. But as far as
Right.
I'm aware, I don't know of any research about communicating through
Right. Because
drilling.
sometimes I'll hear one, you know, like, and then a
Uh-huh.
little
And
ways
then the
away,
other.
I'll hear another one. And I was like, is it just because they're there, or is it one like answering the other just to say, hey, I'm over here?
Yeah, I mean it could be like if it's a territorial pair, they're like alternating so that one of them can be like listening for intruding pairs while the other
Hmm.
one is drilling. Because I assume you can't hear that well while you're drilling. That's just my assumption. Um, I can't hear well when I'm banging my head against something. Um, so it could be something like that where they're leaving gaps. There could be some form of communication. I'm just not familiar with any literature on that specifically.
All right, cool. But they are wonderful to see in your backyard because they're
Yeah,
huge for
they're
one thing,
super cool.
you know, and they have that
Yeah.
laugh when they, seemingly when they fly. So that is really it's really, and you can distinctly tell them from like if they're flying too. You're like, that is a weird looking bird,
Yeah.
compared to
They
what you
look
usually see.
super they have a really unique silhouette for sure. Yeah, you
Oh,
can always tell.
yep. Um, and so are there any, I like to go to the nature centers, like the local state park ones where,
Mhm.
that's a great educational place to go. They have, people like you, right, that are birders and
Mhm.
researchers that are there to educate the public. Do you have some in your area that you go to that you're affiliated with?
I don't. I had some so I used to live in Baltimore until fairly recently. And there was like Robinson Nature Center, and a few others that had like really good resources. I really liked Robinson Nature Center. I've been there a lot. Um, I don't know. I've actually moved to where I live during the pandemic, so I haven't really been out much. But I also lived in Cincinnati for a long time, Cincinnati, Ohio, and the Cincinnati Nature Center is phenomenal. I mean, that's basically like where I got all my nature exposure as a kid. And then I worked there when I was older as a camp counselor. They have something called Reptile Roundup, where like there are no venomous snakes in Southeast Ohio.
Hmm.
And so they actually take kids out and like catch snakes and learn about all the different species. And it's a super fun camp program at the Nature Center. But I do think just in general, nature centers are phenomenal. I have some good friends who lead like bird walks and that sort of stuff at the nature center where people can just come out and just say like, hey, I don't know any birds, but you know them all, so I'll just come out with you, and when we hear a cool bird you can tell me what it is, sort of thing. And I think that's a really really good way to start learning. Also, there's usually local areas will have birding groups. Like I know the Maryland Ornithological Society does a ton of walks. You can just like sign up for their emails and they'll say like, hey, so and so really good birder is going to go birding at this park at 6 a.m. If you show up, you can go birding with them. And it's a super good way to learn your birds, learn the local area, get a good hike in. So I love doing all that stuff.
So do I. And especially if you're watching and you have kids, like, get your
Mhm.
kids out to the nature centers, and because they have great programs if you can this summer. I mean, with COVID it's tough, but um, I know in our area now that, there's a lot of people getting vaccinated, there's a lot more opportunities, I think, this summer for sure than last summer to kind of get out and be with other people with similar interests and educate your kids when it comes to the natural environment.
Yeah, I think also for kids, birds are this incredible opportunity. You know
Hmm.
how like birds can or kids can memorize every dinosaur and like their Latin name and where they were found and what they eat, or they can memorize like every Pokemon and their like are they electric, are they whatever, and what are they strong against and what are their moves. Birds can be one of those things for kids. I met a kid in Massachusetts who was like, I'd been birding for like a decade and he was like 10. Like I'd been birding as long as he was alive. Maybe he was like 13 or 14, but he was a better birder than me, hands down. Like, and he was standing helping me do what we call a point count, where you stand in a place and mark down every bird you hear for 10 minutes.
Hmm.
And he was like, "Oh, I heard an X bird." And I was like, "You did not. I did not hear that bird." And like a minute later, it flew over our heads. And I was like, "Oh, wow." Like that, like he knew them all. He had better hearing than me. Like he knew them by name, by sound, by sight. Like he was like so on it. And he was like 13. And I was like, wow, I've been birding, I started birding when I was like 17 or 18, and like kids have this amazing capacity to learn that like it takes decades as an adult to catch up. So I definitely would suggest exposing kids to this kind of stuff early.
Oh yeah, and it's the type of thing that stays with you for life. I mean, I was that kid that did the dinosaur thing, right? You
Yeah,
know, I knew everything, but I knew a lot about a lot of other stuff too.
right.
I loved just going out and being in nature, and I knew some birds. I didn't know a lot, but yeah, definitely. I have been to the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. That's another.
You've been to the Lab of
Yep,
O?
yep, yep. I
Nice.
did a
That's a really
teacher program at Cornell, and we went there and
that's
visited and
cool.
did some stuff. And I'm a current member, so
Nice. The people at Lab of O are like super incredible and they have all these amazing online resources. So I'm a huge
mhm.
fan.
Oh yeah, eBird is probably like the biggest, I think, digital resource that they're involved in. Do you
Yeah.
use eBird or other citizen science stuff right now?
I don't use it as much as I should. I go birding a lot and all my friends are like, "How did you report it on eBird?" But like I get so into the birding, I forget to get my phone out and like write down what I saw. So I usually go birding with a friend and my friends are usually more glued to their phones than I am and I'm usually like, "Can you keep a list so I can put it on eBird later?" But I do think it's a fabulous resource. Because for me, like I'm mostly just out there for the enjoyment. Like even though birding is a professional thing, it's like when you worked for the Forest Service, you didn't want to go out all the time.
Right.
When I go out to bird for fun, I don't want to think about like anything but just the pure enjoyment of birding. Um, but I think for people who are trying to learn to bird, being like, okay, I'm at this park. What kind of birds have been seen here in the last 3 days? Like, what are even my choices? And you can look and be like, okay, I see a bird. It kind of looks like a flycatcher. There's like 10 flycatchers that look the same if you don't know what you're looking for. Okay, what are my choices? Okay, Eastern Phoebe and Eastern Wood Pewee. There's only two choices. And then you like, because eBird will tell you what people have been seeing. So I think it's a super awesome resource. I should use it more than I do. Um, but I do think it's like I think it's really, really great. And I know a lot of people who use it like religiously when they go out.
Do you do iNaturalist?
Again, I have it.
I have it. I don't
And
always
I
report.
if I oh yeah, I'm really bad at reporting because I just go out to enjoy it. I'm really bad at like I don't want to science when I'm out having
Right.
fun. I want to go out and have fun.
Hmm.
But I do use it when I like bump into a plant I don't know. So I'm not good at reporting, but I'm good at looking up the information I need. So I'm happy that other people report.
Well, the algorithm on that is great now as far as like detecting what it is you're looking at. It's amazing.
Yeah, it really, really is good.
So you've done like the bio blitzes or anything like that, or like big events like bird counts. I know you mentioned like a few that you've done. I have yet
Um,
to do one.
the Christmas bird count is good. I've done that a couple times. I was actually living in like a tiny apartment, so I had a friend. I went to her house and did like the Christmas bird count on her behalf, sort of thing, in a place where there were actually birds. Um, but Yeah, there are a bunch of bird counts. I haven't done any bio blitzes, but I think the bird counts are good. This is again like it's one of those things that as an ornithologist, as someone who believes in citizen science, like I 100% think people should do eBird and iNaturalist and the counts and stuff. And I'm a bit of a hypocrite because I just don't do them. And certainly not as often as I should. I try to keep up with the eBird, but that's really the only one that I make like a huge effort to like try to remember. Like when I get back to my car, I'm like, okay, what did I see? And I like try to put it in there and that kind of stuff. Um, but I do think they're super valuable. And the Christmas bird count is really important for just like, and all the bird counts are really important for scientists who do that sort of geographic, ecological research to have that data because we can't go out as an individual scientist and collect the amount of data that a whole country wide full of people can collect in a very short amount of time. So I think it's it's a super valuable resource. And I think people should do it. Now that I've moved here, actually, I have a house. Maybe I'll do the Christmas bird count next year.
There you go.
So maybe that's my New Year's resolution. I hadn't made one yet, but maybe I'll do some bird counts this year.
That's a good. I like the ones where you can just sit in your house with your binoculars and just kind of be like, okay, just mark this stuff down with your little guide next to you. That's
Yeah. Well, also my problem is that my 4 adorable cats sit at the windows and scare away all the birds. So that's a little bit. There was an adorable little house finch on our feeder, and the kitten like catapulted at the window, and I was like, "Well, there goes any chance I had of seeing a bird at that feeder."
Yeah, we have one of the ones that like suction cups right to the window.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and my dogs just don't give a crap. They just kind of like
Yeah.
sit there and they look at it. There could be birds there, and they're just like, whatever, it's a bird. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
They see a
No, our
dog
time.
like 2 blocks away, they'll bark their heads off. But you know,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, you got to take care of the threat.
the little yellow finch is not a threat. Yeah.
No, not so much.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. My goal, I want to get a squirrel-proof feeder. But
That can be a challenge for sure,
yeah,
depending on what kind of foliage you have around. Squirrels can jump a long way.
yes, they can. I did man like I would like oil and put hot like cayenne pepper on the like
Mm-hmm.
on the pole for the feeder, and that worked for a little while.
Yeah.
But eventually, it just wears off. And
It wears. You have to keep it up. Yeah.
yeah, and those squirrels are uh, the battles in life.
Yes.
Well, I think we are about done here. I have to go to sleep at some point.
All right.
My life, and you're on the East Coast too, so
Yes.
it is getting late for us here.
It is a little bit. Yep.
I give a last shout out for your podcast, which I encourage everyone to check out. If you want to talk a little bit more one last time to promo that.
Yeah, absolutely. Please come join us. It's my husband and I. It's called I'll Take My Science Neat. You can find us wherever you find almost wherever you find your podcast. It's on Apple Podcasts. It's on Spotify. It's on Podbean. You can also go to I'llTakeMyScienceNeat.com and you can look at our merch store. We're doing a giveaway for this cool podcast art. We're doing a canvas right now. This is the tank top. And check out our other cool, cute, and science merch. You can get to the podcast and hear all about us. We want to equip people to learn about science, to get excited about science again. We want to excite the next generation and the people in our generation who've gotten bored with science. And we also want to equip people to take science in their own hands, to understand how to look up the research, how to understand it, what to do with research when you find it, how to tell if it's good research. And so, yeah, please join us. This week, we're going to talk about chocolate. We're going to talk about, is chocolate a drug or a food? And we're going to talk about how the fermentation process and the chemistry behind the flavor in chocolate. And we're also going to do a cool quiz and battle of the wits so you can play along with us and see if you're better than us at chocolate trivia. And so I hope people come check us out. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at MyScienceNeat.
Awesome. Sounds great. And thank you for being on Connected Conversations. We have similar missions as far as educating the public about science, and I love meeting wonderful people involved in science like you. And thank you so much for being here tonight and taking your time to talk about what you do.
Thank you for having me. I
You're
had a lot of fun.
awesome. Thank you so much. And until next time, everyone, good night and goodbye.